Should you play WoW? Depending on who you ask, WoW is the best MMO in the world or the worst. Some people have played it for over a decade and love it like it's their soulmate, while others, well, they will react like you just mentioned their cheating ex-girlfriend if you dare to speak its name. What did WoW do to hurt them? And where do I stand? Let's talk about what WoW does right and what it doesn't with its latest expansion, The War Within. Let's start with solo content because we know we're going to be spending a lot of time doing it. The last time I reviewed WoW, I broke the solo content into 3 sections because I felt like it was strong from levels 1 to 10, and then horribly weak when it sent you to Chromie from levels 10 to 60. But then it was strong again when it sent you to Dragonflight for levels 60 to 70. As I mentioned in that video, 10 to 60 made no sense for the new player, or even for the returning players that had forgotten the story. It shoved you into the middle of Battle for Azeroth's expansion, and none of the dialogue made sense. It talked about places you'd never been as though you'd been there. It talked about people you had never met as though you saved them. It was a mess because they had you skip the base game and all of the story leading up to it and then shoved you into the BFA expansion instead. Fortunately, Blizzard seems to have taken this feedback to heart. It no longer sends you to Chromie to jankily experience the story out of order. Instead, after you finish the tutorial at around level 10, it whisks you away to the Dragonflight expansion, which is some of the best solo content in the entire game. The zones are massive and gorgeous, and best of all, it allows you to unlock dragon riding right away so that you can use skywriting throughout the entire game. Skywriting is the new flying system that WoW has very successfully borrowed from Guild Wars 2. It's a physics-based flying system that's just plain fun. The solo experience is now a lot easier to follow, but it has definitely lost all of its classic MMO charm in the process. Still, it's definitely something far more players are likely to finish as a result. But I will always miss spawning into my race's starting zone at level 1, and in a perfect world, they would have made a new starting zone for each race instead of one for all. But failing that, this is probably the next best thing. As a result of ushering players to Dragonflight, I think new player retention is about to skyrocket, and we'll see a lot more new players make it to the War Within than has been the case in recent expansions. What did it cost WoW to achieve this? Quite literally everything. All of the content that existed before 2022, you now skip all of it. I mean, all of the content is still there, off to the side, as optional, but I doubt a significant portion of the player base will use Chromie to down level and properly experience it, which is kind of sad to think about. New players are probably never going to visit 90% of the zones in the game now. But was this necessary to combat the bloat that comes with adding content to a game for over 20 years? What do you think? One thing is for sure, it's easier and smoother than ever to go from starting the game at level 1 to joining everyone in the newest expansion at level 70. And speaking of the newest expansion, War Within has added a new type of soloable content called Delves. Anyone who's ever wished they could get really good gear, like heroic raid gear from solo content, well, your wish has just been granted. You can push Delves solo in the way that you can push Mythic Plus in a group. You can level up and deck out your companion who will join you in these Delves. Set him up to heal or to help you do damage. I think solo players looking for a solo path to good gear or simply looking for a challenge are gonna love the new content. This is another example of Blizzard hearing people's requests and fulfilling them, so credit given where credit is due. Another great WoW solo activity is soloing the old raids for cool cosmetics that used to be insanely difficult to earn back when those raids were still very difficult to complete. Years of power creep has made it so that these old raids are now soloable, allowing casual players to reap the cosmetic rewards of completing what used to be the hardest content in the game. And the Warband system has improved this, and it's a huge addition to the game, so let's talk about that as well. A couple of my favorite changes to the game are centered around the game's new Warband system. Sadly, one of my least favorite decisions Blizzard made is also due to the Warband system. Let me explain. It has basically made the game incredibly alt-friendly. You can now find gear on one character, and some of that gear you can hand off to an alt. And achievements are now account-wide, so you can 100% zones on different characters to keep it fresh. ESO did this a couple of years ago, and it was a huge success. Now you might be thinking, why would you have a problem with any of that? Well, they made it easier to collect transmogs from the old raids for your alts as well, which sounds amazing until you realize that Blizzard has excluded class sets from the Warband Mog system changes, which means you still have to run every raid on every class every week if you want to farm the cosmetics from them. You can still pick them up in the old raid, but they won't unlock the transmog because you have to find the Hunter class set while playing a Hunter. And just like that, I went from, oh man, I'm definitely going to jump in and farm out the old raid mogs to, oh, I'm definitely not going to jump on and farm out the old raid mogs. I really hope Blizzard rethinks this one, even if it only works in the old expansions. But outside of the decision to not let your demon hunter find and unlock the tier sets for your other classes in the old raids, the Warband system is full of wins. You now have a War Bank tab that is an account-wide tab at your bank that all of your alts can toss items into or pull items from. Gone are the days of having to mail items to your other characters, and as someone who plays a different class with every expansion, I love all of this. They also implemented a thing where each max level character you have increases the speed at which you level your alts. So alts become progressively quicker to level up, and I think this was a pretty cool change. Beyond that, seeing your characters huddled around a campfire, that's just a nice touch. Next, let's talk about WoW's combat. But first, if you love this game, you're gonna love Guild Wars 2, which is one of the most popular MMOs out right now. It's a beautiful, free-to-start MMORPG that respects the player's time with account-wide unlocks. Guild Wars 2 has kindly sponsored this video so that I can tell you about its newest expansion, Janthir Wilds, releasing on August 20th. For the first time in Guild Wars 2's history, a new weapon type will be introduced for land combat, the two-handed spear. Initially designed for underwater combat, Guild Wars 2's Janthir Wilds will allow players to swap freely between aquatic and terrestrial weapon slots, each with unique weapon skills. On top of that, this expansion brings the long-requested housing system called homesteads. Your homestead will be an account-wide personal instance with a structure and land for you to decorate and cultivate. And no, you don't need to worry about silly lotteries, land grabs, rents, or maintenance. And the mount system in Guild Wars 2 is getting even better, with a new method of acquisition for the War Claw and its own mastery line. Now, the War Claw will be automatically unlocked for all players who own Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns or Path of Fire. Guild Wars 2 features tons of amazing solo content in a massive open world for you to explore, and this expansion alone is adding 3 new zones, with more content being added quarterly throughout the year. Of course, this great MMO has new group content as well, such as Convergences, which are 50-player events, and a new raid. It also has a new Fractal dungeon with a challenge mode for 10-player groups and a Wizard's Vault rewards. Guild Wars 2 is a must-try for anyone who enjoys MMOs. Its unique take on the genre makes it an absolute gem to add to your MMO rotation. What are you waiting for? Click the link in the description to try Guild Wars 2 for free, or if you're already in, buy the new expansion. Janthir Wilds awaits. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the video. Combat can make or break MMOs for a lot of people. WoW is a tab target MMO. Or is it? Well, that's up to you now. For 99% of the game, you're perfectly fine to turn on action combat mode in the settings and play WoW as if it were an action combat MMO. Look at your target and fire your abilities. Gone are the days of needing to tab target or manually click on something before you can hit it. But that's not to say that you're never going to need to click on enemies, because sometimes you need to make sure you're kicking the right one. Now, I wasn't even someone who had a problem with tab target, likely because I've been playing World of Warcraft on and off since its beta in 2004. But since then, I have played a lot of action combat MMOs like Black Desert Online, Guild Wars 2, and Elder Scrolls Online. And so as soon as they added this action combat mode to WoW, I was curious how it would stack up. And honestly, it worked. It felt smooth. I was able to effortlessly fire off abilities at whoever I was looking at, but I think action combat is a lot more effective for the tanks and the DPS than it is for the healers. So your mileage may vary with this setting. To me, WoW's combat is one of the best as far as tab target MMOs go. You have a wide variety of classes. Each class then has multiple different specs that you can choose between. And now with War Within, they're even adding a further subdivision beyond that. Do you want to be a Frost Mage or a Fire Mage? Do you want to be a Hunter that focuses on having your pet do damage? Or do you want to go Marksman and focus on making yourself do more damage? Do you want to play as a Druid and then spec into a tank or a healer or a DPS? WoW gives you a lot of choices and a lot of opportunities to find the perfect class and playstyle for you. One potential problem for you might be that this game is known for having a lot of buttons, and it still has a lot of buttons. So if it bothered you before, it will probably still bother you now. But I will say that if you were to force yourself to play this game with 5 or 8 buttons, you'd be able to reach 90% effectiveness on most classes, which would allow you to do everything that you wanted to. Many of these extra abilities are utility-based or for niche situations, and you can live without them, especially if you're not planning to push sweaty content. Speaking about sweaty content, let's talk about group content. Group content is probably what WoW is most known for. When a lot of people think of WoW, they think of the old 40-man raids, the Mythic Plus dungeons, the endgame that everyone always seems so hellbent on sprinting to. And maybe that's for a reason. WoW's dungeons and raids are some of the best that any MMO has to offer. They're absolutely a time sink though. You aren't going to be signing in for a half hour to try out the new raid, not when it first launches. Instead, get ready to set aside at least a couple of hours. But it's a fun couple of hours, especially if you're in a Discord with a gang of friends that you enjoy playing the game with. There's nothing else like it. And you're well rewarded for your time in WoW. You've got great mounts that you can earn and fantastic transmog that you can deck out your character with. Beyond the raid content, you've got Mythic Plus dungeons, which are just dungeons that scale up to 10 different difficulty levels. It used to be more, but War Within compressed the process down to 10 tiers. I'm a big fan of this change. I always burned out way before I got to the highest tiers of Mythic Plus. Climbing through 20 different versions of the same exact dungeon was a bit redundant for my taste. All in all, I enjoy the Mythic Plus dungeon system. It's successfully turned dungeons into a replayable endgame activity with fantastic rewards. This is something almost every other MMO really struggles to achieve with their dungeons. Final Fantasy downlevels you so that you can replay old dungeons while keeping them relevant, but the gear and rewards you receive in them is still low-level, useless gear, so it's not a perfect solution. ESO has multiple tiers of difficulty for its dungeons, but veteran hard mode Fungal Grotto is not exactly going to challenge a veteran player, so it too becomes an imperfect solution. MMOs are repetitive, which can be okay, as long as there's a reward tucked in there that makes the grind worthwhile. For Mythic Plus dungeons, you earn gear upgrades, mounts, and cosmetics, which is everything you could ask for from a dungeon. Now let's talk about PvP. The best part about WoW PvP is that it's not pay to win, which already makes it better than 90% of PvP MMOs out there. I just can't be bothered to fight against people who are swiping their way to the best gear. Anyone that's willing to fight against pay to win whales in a pay to win MMO, I've got bad news. You're an NPC in someone else's game.
Hey, come on now. There's no need to get violent.
It is worth noting the WoW token is a thing and it sucks. It allows you to effectively buy gold with your credit card, which you can then use to buy mediocre gear. But the best gear is earned and not purchased, so the effect of the WoW token on PvP isn't something that will negatively affect your experience. Other forms of PvP include the Battlegrounds, which you can do ranked or unranked, and WoW PvP balance is equal to or better than most other MMOs PvP balance, which isn't to say it's perfect, but it's good enough to enjoy it if you're into PvP. What WoW PvP does well is reward you for putting time into it. You can earn mounts, armor, and cosmetics all by PvPing, which is more than most MMOs can say that they offer with a straight face. Ashes of Creation style of PvP still excites me more than what WoW has to offer, but Ashes of Creation is a game that's charging people $120 to play the alpha and may never actually release. Is Ashes of Creation going to become the next Star Citizen? Well, that's probably a tangent for another video. My only real gripe with WoW PvP is, and has always been, how long crowd control abilities last. You can straight up just lose control of your character for eternities at a time, and usually if you die in PvP, that's why. Next up, we've got population health. If we were to judge MMOs solely based on their population size, well, by that metric, WoW would be the best MMO in the world. More often than not, it boasts the largest population of any MMO. The only one that comes close these days is Final Fantasy XIV, with old school RuneScape getting an honorable mention as well. Suffice it to say, the one thing you don't have to worry about is WoW's population health. It has loads of people playing the game at all times, which means you'll always be able to find a party or a guild to play with if you're keen on it. WoW gets a lot of flack for having an aging and grumpy old population. I think this is half true. There are a lot of guys that have been playing this game for over a decade and now have zero patience for anyone that's still learning the game. It's ironic because those new players are absolutely essential to keeping their beloved MMO alive, and without that injection of fresh blood, WoW would quickly bleed out. So hey, if you're someone that loves WoW and you find yourself chewing out the new guy that's still learning the dungeon, or you're leaving after the first wipe, perhaps consider approaching these things a little bit differently for the sake of your MMO's future. Now, WoW isn't the only game with grumpy veterans. I've played into the endgame of a lot of MMOs, and to be honest, they all have their share of toxic players who stopped having fun a long time ago, but still play the game like it's a job because they don't know how to move on. The fact is, the longer someone plays an MMO, the more likely they are to turn into that miserable old player, and WoW's been around for 20 years, so it's collected its share of them. But by way of its massive population size, it's also got as many or more nice players as any other MMO out there. You just gotta find them. Next, let's talk about the age of the game. Is it holding it back? I'd say that Blizzard has done a great job of overhauling the WoW engine time and time again to make sure it was one of the most powerful engines in the genre, if not the most powerful engine in the genre. You can fly anywhere across multiple zones without a single load screen. You can run alongside massive groups of players in massive events without any lag. Visually, its art style is doing a good job of hanging in there, and the engine overalls and the lighting updates have kept it looking good. But most importantly, like I touched on at the beginning of this video, WoW might as well be only 1 or 2 years old as far as the new player is concerned. New players won't really experience any content that existed before Dragonflight, not until they've gone through Exile's Reach, then the Dragonflight expansion, and now the War Within expansion. And then after they finish all of that, they might go back and clear some of the old content for cosmetics and mounts, but only if they feel like it. So yeah, to the new player, this game might as well only be a couple of years old, and it's kind of weird to think about. I often daydream about a World of Warcraft 2, a sequel to WoW that takes the best of what World of Warcraft has created and leaves the rest and the bloat and the WoW token behind. It's an exciting prospect for some veteran players. It's a terrifying prospect to other veteran players. I'm of the mindset that the 500th mount just isn't as exciting as the first. I really look forward to collecting my first mount in WoW 2 someday. WoW has changed over the years. WoW now focuses on making itself into an endgame lobby for dungeons and raids, rather than being a journey through a mysterious, unexplored world. Don't get me wrong, the raids and the dungeons are a ton of fun, but I do miss the journey. By the numbers, WoW is still the king of the MMO genre, and I don't see WoW 2 showing up until someone manages to dethrone it for a significant amount of time. Blizzard doesn't have a lot of incentive to compete with itself at the moment, and with Riot hitting the reset button on their MMO, it could be a long time until someone challenges WoW more than Final Fantasy XIV is able to. Except there is that one MMO out there that ZOS has been silently making for at least 7 years now. That should be announced any day now. Now let's talk about monetization. WoW is a buy-to-play MMO with a mandatory sub. If it weren't for the WoW token, I would say that monetization was as close to perfect as we'll realistically get in an MMO in 2024 and beyond. I'm personally a subscription enjoyer. I would rather pay for a sub while I'm playing an MMO than have to pay for all the things that I enjoy earning, like gear or cosmetics. 15 bucks a month to enjoy the hell out of every day is worth it for me. But everyone's financial situation is different, so I totally get it if that's out of your budget. If it is out of your budget, then you're one of the few people the WoW token might benefit. You could theoretically grind enough gold in the game to buy your WoW token and therefore your sub with in-game gold, thereby playing World of Warcraft without having to pay cash for the monthly sub. Now, one make or break feature for me in MMOs is my drip, my transmogs, my cosmetics. Can I make my character look awesome by earning cosmetics, or do I have to go to the cash shop to get the best cosmetics? WoW excels here, and this is where that 20 years of content really comes in handy. 20 years of content means 20 years of mounts, 20 years of cool armor transmogs. There is so much to collect, I can almost guarantee you'll never collect all of it. And best of all, a lot of it looks legitimately awesome. In MMOs, when I hit max level, my main concern is getting my character and my mount to look awesome. WoW does better than just about any other MMO in this regard. Probably the only one that even comes close is Final Fantasy XIV. From the monetization standpoint, WoW passes my need test. There's never been a point at which I felt like I needed something from the cash shop. I've never needed to buy cosmetics because there's better stuff that I can earn in game. I've never needed to buy mounts because better mounts can be earned in game. A lot of MMOs are ruined for me because of the need test, but WoW crushes it. Now, let's talk about the future of WoW, because all of this is great, but if the future of the MMO looks bleak, no one's going to want to devote a bunch of time into a dying MMO. Fortunately for WoW, it's as alive as it gets. It has more players than other MMOs, which means it makes more money than other MMOs, which means its expansions are bigger than other MMOs' expansions. The future of WoW is anything but uncertain, as at the moment, WoW has already announced its next 2 expansions that are going to be coming out after the War Within as part of their World Soul saga. So that means we've got expansion content planned and announced for at minimum until 2028. I can't think of another MMO that has announced a roadmap that far out. So let's go over the pros and the cons of WoW as it exists today. And I think it's going to be interesting to look at my old list of pros and cons from my last WoW review that came out with the Dragonflight expansion a couple of years ago, and see if Blizzard has addressed any of these. So at the launch of Dragonflight, I said the solo content was great, but that level 10 through 60 was awful for new players. Today, the solo experience has only gotten better, and Blizzard largely fixed the 10 to 60 experience by sending you straight to Dragonflight and using cutscenes and conversations with NPCs to connect all the necessary dots to make this feel like an infinitely more coherent path to max level than Chromie ever was. So I would say that this first con has been solved. I also said that group content was amazing, but that I really lamented how alt unfriendly WoW was. Pushing Mythic Plus keys on one character made me never want to create an alt because the thought of starting over with basic gear was just not appetizing. Now you can find warband gear or gear that drops 1 tier below your current content, and this gear can be put into your warbank so that you can hand it off to an alt. Achievements are also account wide, so the game is incredibly alt friendly now, so we can mark this one off as solved as well. well. Gear being character bound instead of account bound has been partially solved, with warbound gear being a thing where you can find gear and pass it between your warband. And just like that, Blizzard has kindly addressed every one of my cons from the last video. So I've kindly thought of a couple of new ones. My primary gripe right now is I'm going to say that collecting class set transmogs from old raids needs to be set free. I want to collect my mage transmog while running through old raids on my demon hunter. I am not going to run through every raid every week on every class. I would rather pour salt into my eyes. I have a feeling that no one at Blizzard wants to log in and run every raid every week on every class to collect their transmogs either. So let's make it happen, Blizzard. Let demon hunters find and unlock mage class set transmogs and vice versa, at least for the old content. Maybe one that's a little bit more important would be the addition of a die system. A lot of smaller, less profitable MMOs have added die systems to their game, and players absolutely love it. I think it would be a huge hit in World of Warcraft. You'd be able to combine so many more sets that you found over the years if you could just die some of the channels and make them match better. And those are my latest major gripes with World of Warcraft. They're literally cosmetic, and I think that's a testament to the work that Blizzard's been putting into World of Warcraft to return it to form. They got rid of the borrowed power, so we can't complain about that. They got rid of the problem from 10 to 60. They got rid of the alt unfriendliness. They keep getting rid of the things that we're complaining about, and they even added a way for solo players to get endgame gear. And the rest of my pros are still pros. It's still got talent trees, and it's even adding another layer to that system with War Within. It still has a huge population, active PvP, fair monetization, and a bright future. So to answer the question at the beginning of the video, is WoW's War Within worth playing? Well, hopefully I've provided enough information for you to decide for yourself, but in my opinion, yeah, absolutely. It's the biggest, most successful MMO ever, and it's still evolving at an impressive pace. But what do you think? Would you recommend WoW to someone, or would you recommend a different game? And why? What would you have added to the pros side of this list, or the cons? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to see your guys' answers, and I will absolutely read them. If you're coming back to WoW after a long break, or if you're completely new to the game, check out my complete beginner guide for World of Warcraft, popping up on screen right now or linked in the description of this video. Massive shout out to my channel members. For $5 a month, you too can become a channel member for perks like behind the scenes footage, access to our private Discord channel, and my undying gratitude. If you're not sure what to do next, check out one of these videos popping up on screen right now.